My name is Kenji. My wife stood in front of the kitchen mirror, holding a heavy iron frying pan. She practiced her swing 3 times. She tested the weight of the metal against her palm. Breathing. She was calculating the amount of force needed for authenticity. She checked the angle of the bruise in the mirror, turning her shoulder slowly. She wanted the police photographer to capture the most damaging visual angle. She hesitated for a brief second, closing her eyes to brace herself. Then she slammed the heavy metal into her left shoulder. She gasped loudly as the dull impact echoed across the quiet room. Pain instantly contorted her face, pulling her lips into a tight grimace. But a twisted, arrogant smile quickly replaced her physical agony. She inspected the forming purple bruise with cold satisfaction. She wanted to ensure the police photographer would get the perfect shot. She was willing to endure trauma just to secure my money. She grabbed a wooden dining chair and threw it across the room. It shattered against the counter, sending ceramic plates crashing down. The sharp sound of breaking porcelain filled the entire first floor. She flipped the wooden kitchen table next, grunting with the heavy effort. She was creating a convincing physical scene of chaotic domestic violence. She was carefully crafting her public masterpiece of victimhood and fake survival. Our young child was staying at Akiko's sister's apartment that evening. That was the only reason I could let the trap unfold without rushing home and ruining my own defense. She did not know about the small silver screw above the cabinets. I had installed the hidden wide-angle lens exactly 3 days ago. The camera was invisible, disguised as structural hardware. It possessed a battery that could record continuously for 10 straight days without interruption. The tiny camera silently recorded every fake swing and every broken plate. The lens captured her twisted smile in sharp, high-definition resolution. Akiko pulled out her phone and opened a private, encrypted chat window. She quickly typed a short message to her hidden corporate lover. The message read that the hard part was finally done. Yukio replied, showing he had been waiting by his glowing screen. He sent back 3 emojis of palm trees and flying money stacks. He was already planning how to spend my entire life savings. Akiko hit the dial button and put the phone on speaker mode. Yukio answered on the first ring with a smug, arrogant laugh. He asked if the heavy pan had hurt her delicate skin too much. Akiko laughed out loud, leaning against the broken kitchen counter. She called the sharp pain bearable and worth the final payout. She said it looked natural for a brutal physical assault. She guaranteed the bruise would secure me a very long prison sentence. She told Yukio they would be drinking cocktails in the Maldives soon. Yukio praised her brilliant acting skills and told her he loved her. She promised to call him later and disconnected the active line. She stood still and stared at the blank wall for a moment. Then she changed her facial expression and body language. She transformed into a terrified, broken woman, trembling in pure, calculated fear. She dialed the emergency line with deliberately shaking fingers, waiting for connection. Her voice cracked the second the emergency dispatcher answered the call. She began screaming into the receiver, begging them to save her life. She sobbed out my name, claiming I had gone insane. She begged the police to hurry before I returned to finish the job. While my wife was crying on the emergency line, I was sitting miles away. The downtown police station waiting room was silent. The station smelled of cheap coffee and old floor wax. I sat still, letting the digital clock record every passing second of waiting. I could have rushed home to stop her, but that would only create a dispute. I wanted undeniable destruction of her entire plot. I walked up to the front duty desk with a blank expression. The desk sergeant barely looked up from his messy legal paperwork. He looked exhausted, unaware that he was about to become my most valuable witness. I presented myself as just another annoying civilian with a minor administrative problem. I calmly told him my name was Kenji and that I had lost my passport. I explained that I needed an official police report for a legal replacement. The tired officer handed me a blank declaration form and pointed to a desk. A large digital clock on the wall showed the time. It was the same minute my wife was screaming about an attack. I sat under the station security surveillance camera lens. I picked up a cheap plastic pen and started filling out the document. I made sure my face was clearly visible to the recording lens. I took my time writing every letter in clear, block handwriting. I did not rush a single stroke of the blue ballpoint ink. I walked back to the desk and handed the completed paper to the officer. He stamped the sheet with a heavy, official red seal. The stamp recorded my physical presence inside a secure government building. The timestamp proved I was 3 kilometers away from my own kitchen. It was mathematically impossible for me to be swinging a weapon inside my own home. I had secured my geographical location inside the state database. I thanked the officer politely and folded the stamped copy into my pocket. My perfect alibi was now locked inside the secure police archive. I walked out of the glass doors and checked my wristwatch. It was finally time to go home and face the public arrest she planned. I turned down my quiet suburban street and saw the flashing red lights. 2 marked patrol cars were parked on my front lawn. Neighbors were standing on their porches, whispering loudly and pointing at my house. I parked my car slowly and stepped out with empty hands. Akiko ran out the front door, wrapped tightly in a gray police blanket. She pointed a trembling finger at my chest and screamed. She told the arresting officers I was a brutal criminal who tried to kill her. She sobbed, clutching her bruised shoulder for the crowd. 3 heavy officers rushed me instantly, drawing their batons as they closed the distance. They slammed me hard against the hood of my own vehicle. They forced my arms painfully behind my back, pressing my face against the metal. Cold steel handcuffs clicked tightly around my bare wrists. The metal cuffs cut sharply into my skin, but I ignored the stinging pain. Physical discomfort was a cheap price for a flawless legal defense. An older officer read me my legal rights while pushing my head down. He shoved me roughly into the back of the dark police cruiser. The neighborhood crowd glared at me with unfiltered disgust. The local community had instantly decided I was a brutal, unforgivable domestic abuser. I saw Mrs. Tanaka shake her head, covering her mouth in exaggerated horror. I saw the mailman taking a picture of my arrest with his phone. Akiko locked eyes with me for one brief second over the officer's broad shoulder. I saw the pure, arrogant triumph shining brightly in her tearful eyes. I did not resist the physical arrest or shout a single claim of innocence. I looked through the window, offering no reaction. She expected me to beg for mercy or scream in panicked, defensive anger. My total silence frustrated her, but she hid it behind another fake sob. She leaned against a paramedic, playing the fragile survivor for the audience. The patrol car doors slammed shut, trapping me in the dark back seat. The tires screeched as the officer accelerated away from my destroyed home. I watched my house disappear in the rearview mirror as they drove me away. By midnight, the internet had already judged and convicted me without a trial. A local news page posted my mugshot alongside a picture of her bruise. Social media feeds exploded with tens of thousands of angry, hateful comments. Anonymous strangers demanded the highest possible prison sentence for the monster. People tagged my employer, demanding my immediate termination from my corporate position. Influencers shared her story to gain cheap engagement points, feeding the digital outrage. I sat alone inside a concrete holding cell at the main precinct. The iron bench was freezing cold, but my mind was focused on strategy. I understood exactly how the digital crowd functioned in a public scandal. They did not care about truth, physical evidence, or basic legal due process. They only wanted the instant chemical rush of unearned moral superiority. The simple narrative of a helpless victim and a cruel villain fed their hungry egos. They loved hating me because it made them feel self-righteous and heroic. They shared her official donation link hundreds of thousands of times across platforms. My professional and personal reputation was destroyed within a single night. This was exactly what she had predicted when she swung that iron pan. Every cruel comment and shared post was a permanent, undeniable digital record. My future lawyer would later use this public defamation against her. I leaned my head against the cold concrete wall and closed my eyes. I was letting the enemy celebrate their temporary victory as loudly as possible. She thought the public attention would build an impenetrable shield of protection around her. She forgot that an audience only makes a sudden fall fatal. Every public television interview and social media post created another visible legal liability. The higher she climbed on this pile of false statements, the harder she would crash. She thought she was destroying my life with a flawless scheme. In reality, she was meticulously building her own public, inescapable prison cell. 3 days later, I sat on the edge of a cheap motel mattress. I had just posted my bail money to secure a temporary release from custody. The tiny room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and cheap cleaning chemicals. The neon sign outside buzzed loudly against the cracked glass window. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small metallic silver screw. I twisted the fake metal top, revealing a tiny micro-memory card hidden inside. I slid the tiny black chip into my encrypted phone adapter. The main file directory instantly opened on my cracked, glowing screen. I tapped the single high-definition video file titled, "With the date of her attack." The screen displayed a wide-angle view of my ruined kitchen. I watched Akiko grab the frying pan and strike herself with brutal, calculated force. I watched her throw the chairs and destroy the wooden table. The audio recording alone was enough to prove severe conspiracy to commit felony fraud. The crystal-clear video footage elevated the situation into a devastating, inescapable legal trap. I turned the phone volume all the way up to the maximum setting. The small speaker blasted her cruel laughter as she joked with Yukio on the phone. I listened to her brag about stealing my money and sending me to prison. I paused the video right on her twisted, triumphant, arrogant smile. They thought they had trapped helpless prey in their elaborate snare. They did not realize they had just handed me the tools for their destruction. They were drinking champagne in Yukio's expensive apartment, celebrating my social execution. They had no idea I was already preparing their final sentencing documents. I locked the screen and shoved the heavy phone deep into my pocket. My initial anger was gone, replaced by cold, mathematical patience. I had the definitive proof, but I could not reveal it right now. Releasing it early would only give them a chance to invent a new lie. I needed to let her commit perjury on a legally binding public stage. I needed her to swear under official oath before I dropped the final evidence. Now I just needed to find a lawyer arrogant enough to fight the entire world. The hunt was on, and I was the one in control. The leather chair in the downtown legal office felt expensive. I sat quietly while the senior defense attorney reviewed my toxic public file. Mr. Sato pushed the thick stack of printed news articles back across his wide mahogany desk. He looked at me with professional exhaustion. He bluntly stated that my current public reputation was destroyed. The whole country hated me, and my wife had secured flawless victim status. He told me that no jury in the world would ever believe my side of the story. Her fake bruises and tearful television interviews had already convicted me. The aggressive media campaign had turned me into a national symbol of domestic cruelty. Finding a jury pool without prejudice was practically impossible right now. I did not waste my breath trying to argue with his cynical assessment. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single, folded piece of cheap paper. I placed the official police report flat on the polished wooden surface. I slid the document slowly across the desk until it stopped right in front of him. Sato picked up the sheet with an annoyed sigh, expecting a useless character reference. His eyes scanned the text, stopping dead on the heavy red ink stamp. I watched his professional boredom instantly vanish from his sharp features. He stared at the time recorded by the desk sergeant at the downtown precinct. I calmly told him that this document proved my exact location. I was standing inside a government building when my wife claimed I was attacking her. Sato read the document 3 more times just to be certain. A slow, dangerous smile finally appeared on the experienced lawyer's face. He recognized the brutal efficiency of my quiet preparation. I had let her build a public platform of lies while holding a weapon that could destroy it all. He set the paper down and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. He asked me why I had not shown this evidence to the arresting officers. I explained that showing it too early would only give her a chance to change her story. I needed her to lock herself into a permanent, undeniable legal trap first. If I stopped her scheme on the very first day, she would claim a misunderstanding. I needed her to commit severe, documented perjury before a presiding judge. Sato nodded slowly, understanding the cold nature of my strategy. He agreed to take my case, warning me that his services would be expensive. Money was irrelevant to me at this point. I was willing to spend every dollar I had to ensure her destruction. Across the city, Akiko was capitalizing on her brand new fame. She sat under the bright studio lights of the most popular morning broadcast program. She wore a modest gray sweater designed to make her look fragile. A thick layer of specialized makeup highlighted the dark shadows under her crying eyes. She sobbed loudly into a tissue, describing the horrific abuse she had supposedly survived. The television host held her hand, captivated by her performance. She claimed that I had terrorized her for years behind closed doors. She hinted that even our child had never been safe near me. She wove a brilliant fictional tale about escaping my violent control just in the nick of time. The news channel flashed a large graphic across the bottom of the broadcast screen. It displayed a direct payment link to a dedicated emergency relief fund in her name. The host begged the viewing audience to support this brave, broken woman. People watching at home opened their digital wallets out of blind pity. Every viewer wanted to feel like a generous hero saving a helpless victim. They gladly sent their hard-earned money to fund her fabricated trauma. Later that afternoon, Akiko sat alone on the expensive sofa in our living room. She held a silver tablet, refreshing the application for her secure bank account. The balance was climbing at an absolutely terrifying, unnatural speed. Thousands of dollars poured into her private funds every time she updated the screen. Her fake tears were gone, replaced by a greedy grin. She had monetized her fake trauma, turning public sympathy into pure cash. She poured herself a glass of expensive wine to celebrate her financial victory. She believed she had secured her wealthy future without any real effort. She did not realize that every digital transaction left a permanent record. She was unknowingly building a large-scale financial fraud case against herself. The central courthouse was packed with angry reporters and curious spectators the next morning. I walked into the crowded room wearing a cheap suit and a blank facial expression. Akiko sat 3 rows behind the prosecutor, trembling for the gathered cameras. She looked at me with terrified eyes, playing her part with perfection. The aggressive prosecutor demanded that my temporary release be revoked. He claimed I was a violent monster who posed a severe threat to the community. He pointed at my wife, reminding the judge of her brutal physical injuries. The gallery murmured in loud agreement, eager to see me punished without a proper trial. Mr. Sato stood up calmly, ignoring the public tension in the room. He did not dramatically reveal the police report or shout about my obvious innocence. Instead, he methodically attacked the strict procedural weaknesses in the arrest warrant. He casually pointed out minor timeline inconsistencies in her initial recorded statement. He calmly reminded the judge that I had absolutely no prior criminal history. He argued that denying my freedom based purely on internet rumors was a severe overreach. He provided verified financial records, proving I was a stable, employed citizen. He neutralized the prosecutor's aggressive emotional appeals with boring procedural facts. The judge looked over the initial filing documents with a deep, frustrated frown. The legal paperwork was thin, relying mostly on her emotional testimony alone. The judge slammed his heavy wooden gavel down onto the sounding block. He denied the prosecutor's motion, guaranteeing my continued pretrial freedom. A loud gasp of pure outrage echoed through the crowded courtroom gallery. Akiko dropped her innocent act for a split second, her eyes flashing with genuine anger. She expected to see me dragged out in heavy chains, humiliated and broken. Watching me walk out the front door as a legally free man damaged her fragile ego. She squeezed the wooden bench in front of her until her knuckles turned white. This was the very first crack in her designed illusion of total control. I stepped out onto the courthouse steps, blinded by dozens of flashing camera lights. Reporters shoved microphones toward my face, screaming aggressive questions. I ignored every accusation and kept my face devoid of any emotion. I walked straight to a waiting taxi, leaving the angry media circus behind me. Akiko slammed the heavy door to her own lawyer's private consultation room. She dropped her fragile victim mask instantly, pacing the floor in a fit of wild fury. She screamed at her expensive attorney, demanding to know why I was allowed to leave. She asked how a supposedly violent abuser could just walk out of a secure courthouse. Her lawyer sighed, trying to explain basic judicial standards to an irrational client. He told her that pretrial release was a very common administrative procedure. He advised her to stay calm and let the slow judicial process work normally. She refused to listen, insulted that the legal system did not instantly obey her wishes. She stormed out of the legal office and dialed Yukio on her mobile phone. He answered quickly, sounding slightly nervous about the unexpected courtroom setback. She angrily told him that the judge was a complete idiot who had ruined her flawless narrative. She swore she would escalate her media campaign until I was destroyed. Yukio told her to be careful, warning her that pushing too hard might draw unwanted attention. He reminded her that they already had enough donated money to fund their tropical escape. She ignored his sudden caution, driven by her wounded pride. She mocked his sudden cowardice, promising to release a public statement tonight. Her narcissistic pride could not handle this minor procedural defeat. She needed to prove she was untouchable, which meant she was going to talk even more. I sat alone in the dark corner of my cheap, stained motel room. The glowing screen of my battered laptop illuminated my tired face with harsh blue light. Mr. Sato was connected through a secure video link on the right side of my screen. He casually sipped a glass of expensive bourbon while watching me organize digital files. He told me to let her keep talking on every available broadcast network. He explained that every television interview was another string tied to her own hanging rope. I created a brand new encrypted folder labeled with today's date. I systematically dragged 30 different screenshots of her social media posts into the secure vault. I captured every horrific lie she told about my fabricated violent history. I logged every claim she made about her fake injuries and her terrible emotional suffering. I opened a separate directory dedicated to her new donation fund. I took detailed captures of the payment portals and the rising public transaction numbers. I matched her publicly declared income statements against the influx of digital cash. The mathematical discrepancy was huge, establishing a clear motive for large-scale financial fraud. The pain of being publicly labeled a monster was fading into cold focus. I was transforming every insult into a sharp weapon for my upcoming cross-examination. My phone vibrated against the cheap wooden desk, displaying a new news alert. Akiko had just posted another lengthy statement attacking my character and sanity. She claimed she was living in constant terror while I roamed the city streets freely. She practically begged her army of followers to send even more emergency funding. She accused the judicial system of failing to protect women from dangerous predators. She was attacking the very judges who would eventually oversee her own perjury trial. I pressed the capture button and dropped the new image into the primary evidence file. The trap was quietly expanding, and she was eagerly jumping right into the center of it. I sat in the heavy leather chair opposite Mr. Sato's mahogany desk. He was busy organizing the chaotic documents from my recent bail hearing. I placed my encrypted mobile phone on the polished wooden surface. I connected the small metal adapter containing the hidden micro-memory chip. I calmly told him we already had enough digital screenshots of her public lies. It was finally time to show him the actual physical weapon I possessed. Sato looked at the small glowing screen with tired professional patience. He expected to see a generic, blurry recording of a minor domestic verbal argument. I pressed the play button on the single high-definition media file. The crystal-clear audio of breaking ceramic plates filled the quiet legal office. Sato instantly stopped breathing as he watched Akiko swing the heavy iron pan. He watched her strike her own left shoulder with brutal, calculated force. He listened to her arrogant laughter echoing through my destroyed kitchen. The experienced defense attorney stared at the screen in total silence. He watched the entire recorded phone call with her hidden corporate lover. I paused the video right on her twisted, triumphant, and arrogant smile. Sato slowly took off his expensive reading glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. He leaned back in his heavy chair and exhaled into the quiet room. He had spent his entire professional career defending desperate, terrified clients. He suddenly realized he was sitting across from a different creature. He pointed at the frozen image of my wife holding the heavy metal weapon. He demanded to see the stamped police report I had shown him 2 days ago. I reached into my jacket pocket and handed him the official folded document. He placed the red ink stamp next to the digital video player. He checked the timestamp on the police report against the video recording. They matched down to the very last verified digital second of the timeline. A slow, dangerous smile spread across the cynical defense attorney's face. He finally understood the full scale of the trap I was building. I had the power to stop the terrible arrest before it even happened. I chose to let her destroy my entire public reputation instead. I let her brand me as a violent monster on national television broadcasts. I allowed the entire country to judge me without a single piece of real evidence. Sato looked at me with a mix of genuine shock and professional admiration. He called my silent strategy ruthless and brilliantly executed. I told him a quick dismissal would only give her a chance to escape. I wanted her locked inside an inescapable perjury trap she could never break. If we showed the video today, she would claim it was a twisted joke. We needed her to swear under court oath that the fake attack was real. Sato asked me if I was certain about pushing this to the limit. He warned me that this specific legal path would destroy her life. I looked at him without any trace of hesitation or sudden regret. I told him she had freely chosen the title of victim for public profit. I was ensuring she received the full experience of a large-scale financial fraud investigation. My sympathy died the moment she picked up that iron pan. Sato agreed with my cold logic and stood up from his desk. He walked over to the large glass whiteboard mounted on the far office wall. He picked up a black marker and drew a circle right in the center. He wrote Akiko's name inside the circle and tapped the thick glass sharply. He drew a red timeline showing her escalating television interviews and public posts. He noted every time she asked for digital relief fund donations. He explained that every new broadcast added another criminal charge to her future indictment. We were moving past simple disputes straight into wire fraud. I handed him a secondary storage drive containing hundreds of organized digital folders. I had categorized every lie she told into specific legal categories. Folder 1 contained all her defamatory television interviews, broadcast on national networks. Folder 2 held the archive of her fake crying videos. Folder 3 was dedicated to tracking her aggressive financial fraud campaign. Sato plugged the drive into his laptop and scrolled through the evidence. He whistled softly under his breath, impressed by my methodical data collection. I had essentially done the entire job of a prosecution team alone. He picked up a blue marker to designate the opposing legal team's expected strategy. He predicted they would try to rush the civil trial to maximize media momentum. They wanted to secure a financial settlement before the public forgot about her tragedy. We were going to use their own greedy momentum to destroy them. Sato explained that we would offer zero resistance during the initial civil discovery phase. We would act defeated, encouraging them to demand aggressive records. By pretending to surrender, we would force them to submit their own banking records for verification. When they submitted their forged income statements, the trap would lock. I pulled out a printed ledger from my secure legal folder and handed it over. The pages contained detailed tracking data of her rising digital banking accounts. Sato pinned the bank statements right next to her name on the glass board. He drew a thick black line connecting her fake injuries to the stolen donation money. We had tracked over $50,000 pouring into her private funds. People were eagerly paying for a fictional tragedy she invented for pure personal profit. Sato explained that we needed to request a complete forensic financial audit. We would hide the audit request deep inside a standard legal discovery motion. Her arrogant lawyers would blindly sign the routine paperwork without reading the small print. They would legally authorize their own client's financial destruction. Once the audit started, we would have legal access to every hidden transaction. We would easily expose where the stolen donation money was being routed. I nodded slowly, memorizing the exact sequence of our upcoming procedural strikes. We were quietly building a legal guillotine while the whole world cheered for her. Sato sat back down and opened a blank legal document template on his computer screen. He told me we needed to draft the specific language for the financial audit tonight. He typed, using boring standard legal terminology to hide our true lethal intentions. The document looked like a generic request for asset division. I watched the digital cursor move across the glowing screen, securing another layer of our hidden trap. We buried the forensic audit clause deep inside paragraph 40 of the document. No lazy opposing attorney would ever bother to read that deep into a standard administrative filing. They would blindly sign the bottom line, eager to collect their billing rates. Sato printed the thick stack of papers and dropped them onto his wooden desk. He stamped the signature line with a bright yellow marker, preparing it for courier delivery. He looked at the finished document like a hunter admiring a placed steel snare. All we had to do now was wait for the blind prey to step into the center. Sato picked up the signed document and placed it carefully into a thick leather briefcase. He closed the heavy metal clasp with a sharp, satisfying click echoing in the room. He told me the court date was set for the end of the current month. We had exactly 3 weeks to let her dig her own digital grave as deep as possible. I promised him I would not interrupt her glorious moment in the public spotlight. I wanted her to feel invincible right up until the second the trap snapped shut. She needed to believe she had outsmarted the entire judicial system. Her ego was the best weapon we had in our entire legal arsenal. I stood up from the comfortable leather chair and shook the attorney's hand firmly. We had established a perfect alliance built on the promise of total destruction. Across the city, Yukio was pacing the hardwood floor of his luxury penthouse. The large flat-screen television replayed the evening news broadcast in the background. He hated seeing the recent footage of me walking out of the courthouse. My sudden legal freedom threatened his comfortable illusion of complete victory. His initial arrogant confidence was cracking under the intense pressure of reality. He realized the justice system was not instantly executing me like they had foolishly planned. He walked over to the tall glass windows overlooking the glowing downtown city skyline. He had bought this expensive apartment using credit secured against my future stolen assets. If my wife failed to drain my bank accounts, he would be ruined within a single month. His entire luxurious lifestyle was built on a foundation of desperate lies. He refreshed his own banking application on his glowing mobile phone screen. The pending transfers from her donation fund were the only things keeping his creditors away. He poured himself a tall glass of imported whiskey with slightly shaking hands. He pulled out his expensive phone and dialed Akiko's private encrypted number. She answered, surrounded by the loud noise of an upscale cosmetic salon. She was preparing her physical appearance for another tearful media interview. Yukio angrily demanded to know why her expensive lawyers had failed today. He asked how a supposedly violent abuser was allowed to roam the public streets freely. Akiko laughed dismissively, unbothered by the minor procedural legal setback. She told him to stop acting like a terrified child over nothing.
The betrayer ignores the first warning signs of collapse because acknowledging reality means accepting their own guilt. Status pressure and pure greed force them to double down on a failing strategy. They choose the comfortable illusion of control over the painful truth of their extreme vulnerability. Their ego cannot process the fact that they are already caught.
She promised she was preparing a media bomb for the upcoming week. She planned to release a ghost-written memoir detailing her fake survival story. She swore the new publishing deal would make them both rich and untouchable. She told him to focus on booking their expensive tropical flights. Yukio gripped his crystal glass tightly, desperately wanting to believe her confident lies. He ignored his growing fear, blinded by the promise of endless stolen wealth. He took a long drink of whiskey and hung up the active phone connection. He decided to trust her public performance instead of listening to his own rational survival instincts. He turned the television volume up higher to silence the quiet doubts echoing in his own mind. The news anchor began discussing my wife's upcoming book deal with a publishing house. The anchor praised her incredible bravery, calling her a shining beacon for abuse survivors everywhere. Yukio smiled weakly at the screen, forcing himself to believe the beautiful, profitable lie. He did not know every printed page of that book would serve as a formal written confession. I was already tracking the publishing advance money pouring into his accounts. The chaotic media storm was reaching its highest, most profitable peak in the public eye. But the terrible, unavoidable fall was approaching from the blind side. My lawyer and I had finally finished building the perfect stage for her final tragic performance. The first act of my legal vengeance was finally ready to begin. I saw her giant face glowing brightly above the busiest commercial intersection in the city, dominating the entire skyline with her fabricated tragedy. A digital billboard proudly displayed the newly revealed cover art of her upcoming ghost-written memoir to thousands of angry passing pedestrians. The major publishing company had deliberately chosen a dramatic black and white photograph to serve as the main promotional visual cover. She stared into the camera lens with carefully engineered tears shining brightly in her dark, manipulated eyes. The provocative title was printed in aggressive red letters across the bottom of the towering electronic advertising screen for everyone to read. It read, "Surviving the Silence," accompanied by a guaranteed national release date scheduled for the end of the current month. A major national publisher had paid her a large financial advance to secure the exclusive printing rights to her fake trauma. They desperately wanted to rush the initial printing process while public outrage against me was still high and profitable. Hundreds of angry citizens stopped on the busy concrete sidewalk to take supportive digital pictures of the towering electronic advertisement. Yukio stood near the edge of the crowded crosswalk below the glowing display panel, surrounded by her dedicated fans. He stared up at his secret lover's giant face with a sudden, sharp feeling of dread settling in his stomach. He quickly pulled his dark coat collar up high to hide his nervous face from the passing crowd of angry civilian pedestrians. The public exposure was becoming way too large for him to handle comfortably within the safety of his secret life. He always preferred to steal my money quietly from the safety of the deep, untraceable corporate shadows he usually operated within. Seeing her fake personal tragedy, monetized on a city billboard, made him feel exposed to financial crime scrutiny. He knew that financial crimes investigators constantly monitored high-profile media figures for hidden tax discrepancies and sudden wealth transfers. Her arrogant demand for constant public attention was putting his own personal freedom at severe risk of court discovery. He realized with sudden clarity that he could no longer control the dangerous monster he had so eagerly helped create. Yukio walked quickly away from the busy public intersection and entered an exclusive luxury jewelry boutique located deeper inside the downtown district. The heavy glass door clicked shut behind him, instantly blocking out the loud noise of the chaotic city streets and angry crowds. He desperately needed to physically feel his newly stolen wealth to effectively calm his rising internal panic and deep anxiety. A sharply dressed luxury salesman approached him and offered a tall glass of expensive imported sparkling water on a silver tray. Yukio ignored the polite drink offer and pointed at a heavy, solid gold watch displayed inside the reinforced glass case. The eager salesman carefully unlocked the cabinet and placed the diamond-encrusted luxury timepiece onto a soft, black velvet presentation tray. He quoted a ridiculous price tag of $45,000 without any trace of hesitation in his voice. Yukio did not bother to negotiate the price or ask for a standard promotional discount from the smiling retail clerk. He reached into his tailored designer jacket, pulled out a sleek black metal credit card, and dropped it onto the counter. The heavy customized card was linked to the overflow account hiding the profits from her public digital donation fund. He was literally buying expensive luxury jewelry using the misplaced blind pity of thousands of strangers who hated my existence. The retail payment terminal beeped loudly, instantly approving the financial transaction without triggering a single automated bank security warning. The salesman smiled widely and handed over the heavy, branded luxury shopping bag with a deep, respectful bow. Yukio strapped the cold, solid gold medal securely around his left wrist before walking back out of the quiet luxury store. The heavy physical weight of the expensive jewelry temporarily silenced his growing rational fear of prison and financial ruin. He convinced his own mind that only untouchable winners could afford to casually wear such ridiculously expensive luxury items in public. He consciously chose to ignore the undeniable fact that he was spending tracked criminal evidence on a public street. Across the busy city, Akiko was preparing for her most important national television broadcast appearance to date. She sat confidently backstage in a private VIP dressing room surrounded by expensive professional makeup artists and anxious network producers. The major broadcast network had promoted this exclusive primetime interview for 5 straight days across every digital platform. Over 10 million dedicated viewers were tuning in to hear her tragic fake story broadcast live to the nation. She wore a modest white designer suit, chosen to project an image of total innocence and complete moral purity. She walked slowly onto the brightly lit broadcast stage, to a deafening wave of standing studio applause from the crowd. The famous television host hugged her gently and carefully guided her toward a comfortable soft gray armchair positioned in the center. The studio audience went silent, eagerly waiting for the dramatic emotional performance to begin under the bright lights. Akiko looked into the primary red broadcast camera and let a single tear fall with practiced perfection. She described the specific evening I supposedly attacked her with a heavy, solid iron frying pan inside our quiet suburban kitchen. She falsely swore under the bright studio lights that she had desperately begged me to stop hitting her fragile body. She claimed I laughed like a deranged maniac while I destroyed our wooden kitchen table in a fit of rage. The host handed her a fresh tissue, openly weeping right along with the manipulated and sympathetic live studio audience. He looked furiously at the camera lens and loudly called the current judicial system a complete moral failure. He demanded to know why a violent, dangerous monster like me was still freely roaming the public streets without consequence. Akiko nodded slowly, publicly begging the presiding judge to lock me safely inside a prison cell for the rest of my life. The broadcast network flashed the direct pre-order link for her upcoming ghostwritten book across the bottom of the television screen. Thousands of loyal viewers rushed to buy early copies, crashing the publisher's digital retail servers in less than 2 minutes. She had manipulated an entire nation into funding her private luxury vacation plans with their own hard-earned money. She felt invincible, sitting proudly on top of a public empire built on a foundation of lies. I sat quietly on the edge of the uncomfortable mattress inside my cheap, stained temporary motel room on the edge of town. I watched her entire dramatic national broadcast on a battered television set with the audio volume turned down low. I did not feel a single ounce of genuine anger as she confidently dragged my professional reputation through the dirt. I was focused on transcribing her exact spoken words into a secure, encrypted digital text document. She had just publicly confirmed the exact physical weapon and the specific time of the fake domestic attack. She had locked herself into a detailed fictional narrative on a globally recorded, fully documented national media broadcast. She truly thought the television audience would serve as an impenetrable legal shield against the eventual arrival of the truth. She failed to realize those 10 million loyal viewers were going to become my own pool of personal witnesses. I closed my heavy laptop and pressed the power button on the cheap plastic television remote control to end the visual feed. The glowing screen instantly faded to black, cutting off the loud, annoying sound of the cheering, manipulated studio audience. I picked up my encrypted mobile phone and sent a secured text message to my attorney, Mr. Sato. I told him we had collected enough public rope to flawlessly execute the final legal drop. I placed the dark phone face down on the scratched wooden desk and walked slowly over to the dirty motel window. The chaotic media storm was raging outside, but my mind remained utterly silent. I had meticulously built an inescapable mathematical legal trap, and the blind prey was happily dancing in the center. I walked into the quiet downtown legal office early the next morning, wearing a clean, pressed dark suit. Mr. Sato was already waiting patiently for me with a stack of finalized, stamped district court documents on his desk. He did not offer me a morning drink or attempt to engage in any useless, polite social conversation before starting the meeting. He pushed a single piece of heavy printed paper across the polished surface of his expensive wooden desk. I picked up the formal schedule and read the official red ink stamp issued by the Central District presiding judge. The preliminary civil discovery hearing was scheduled to begin in exactly 48 hours from this moment. Sato smiled sharply, loudly tapping his expensive metal pen against the hard edge of his secure leather laptop case. He excitedly confirmed that her expensive legal team had swallowed our carefully hidden procedural legal bait without a single question. They had blindly signed the discovery motion without ever reading the tiny financial audit clause hidden deep inside the administrative text. We now possessed full court-granted authority to rip open her private banking history without offering them any advance warning. Sato told me her arrogant lawyers were eager to humiliate me in a public judicial setting. They had petitioned the presiding judge to allow live television broadcast cameras inside the district courtroom. They desperately wanted to use the public broadcast to secure a devastating financial settlement almost instantly during the hearing. They foolishly believed the intimidating presence of the national media would force us into a quick, cowardly legal surrender. I placed the finalized schedule back down on the desk and nodded slowly in complete strategic agreement with his assessment. Allowing live television cameras into the secure district courtroom was the greatest strategic mistake they could possibly ever make. I wanted the entire angry country to watch her flawless public performance crumble in real time. I wanted the same loyal viewers who blindly bought her book to personally witness her permanent legal destruction. Sato closed his heavy leather briefcase and locked the metal clasp with a sharp, echoing mechanical snap that filled the room. He looked at me with the cold, focused, dangerous intensity of a professional fighter, finally stepping into the fighting ring. He loudly declared that the endless public media circus was over, and the real devastating legal work was finally starting. The very first act of our inescapable trap was ready, and it was finally time to publicly reveal the perfect alibi. The heavy oak doors of the Central District Courthouse swung open with a loud, echoing crack. Live television cameras tracked my every step down the long center aisle. The public gallery was packed with angry reporters typing on their mobile devices. The crowd murmured with hatred as I walked past the wooden benches. Akiko sat at the opposing plaintiff table, wearing a modest, pale beige designer dress. She held a clean white tissue tightly in her right hand, dabbing at dry eyes. Her expensive lead attorney stood up and pointed an aggressive finger at my face. He loudly called me a violent monster who deserved the maximum possible punishment. I did not blink or show any trace of nervous hesitation to the hostile crowd. I stared at the bright red recording light mounted on the primary broadcast camera. They desperately wanted to broadcast a public, humiliating legal execution today. I was ready to give the entire angry nation exactly what they were begging to see. The presiding judge sharply struck his sounding block to establish order in the loud room. He firmly instructed Akiko's side to call their primary witness to the stand. Akiko walked slowly toward the elevated wooden witness box near the judge. She intentionally dragged her feet against the carpet to appear broken and fragile. She placed her right hand flat on the leather binding of the court oath book. She loudly swore to tell the truth under the severe penalty of criminal perjury. Akiko's attorney spent the first 20 minutes having her repeat the horrific details of my supposed attack. She wept loudly while describing the heavy iron pan striking her delicate shoulder. Mr. Sato finally stood up from our defense table when it was his official turn for cross-examination. He walked toward the wooden stand with his hands empty and open. He did not carry a single intimidating legal document or aggressive piece of visual evidence. He approached the hostile witness with a very calm, polite, and non-threatening posture. He spoke softly, asking her to clarify a few minor timeline details for the official court record. Akiko smiled weakly, believing she held control over the room. She thought my expensive lawyer had given up on trying to mount a real defense against her. She relaxed her tense shoulders, eager to lock the final nail into my public coffin. Sato asked her to clearly confirm the specific time I supposedly struck her with the heavy weapon. She leaned close to the sensitive microphone and stated it was exactly 8:15 in the evening. He asked if she was certain about that specific digital timeline. He gently reminded her that minor memory mistakes were common during traumatic events. She arrogantly refused the easy exit he had just offered her on a silver platter. She confidently swore she had looked at the kitchen clock while I was breaking the wooden table. Sato nodded slowly and thanked her for being so precise under such extreme public pressure. He turned his back on her and walked straight back to our quiet defense table. He picked up a single thin brown folder resting right next to my folded hands. He pulled out the stamped piece of cheap paper I had secured from the downtown police precinct. He submitted the document to the court clerk as Defense Exhibit Number 1. The lead opposing attorney jumped up and shouted a loud objection to the sudden new evidence. He claimed we were attempting to introduce unverified, questionable late documentation. The judge reviewed the heavy red ink stamp and overruled the sudden loud objection without hesitation. Sato turned back to face my confident wife, still sitting casually on the elevated witness stand. He asked her how I could possibly swing a heavy weapon inside our suburban kitchen at 8:15. He smoothly informed the quiet courtroom that I was standing inside a secure government building at that same minute. The official precinct record proved I was reporting a lost passport. The document contained a verified, digital timestamp that destroyed Akiko's timeline in front of everyone. I was exactly 3 miles away from our house when she claimed I was breaking her bones. The entire crowded courtroom went silent for 5 long, agonizing seconds. The live broadcast cameras instantly zoomed in tightly on Akiko's suddenly pale, frozen face. Her practiced, fragile smile collapsed into a raw mask of undeniable confusion. She stared blankly at Sato, unable to process the impossibility of the moment. The arrogant opposing attorney snatched the submitted document from the court clerk. He stared at the red timestamp, desperately searching for a single procedural error or obvious forgery. The heavy paper was authentic, signed by an active-duty desk sergeant and sealed by the state. Sato did not stop pressing his newly revealed tactical advantage. He handed the clerk a digital storage drive containing the internal police security camera footage. The judge ordered the video file to be played on the large primary presentation screen. The high-definition video showed me calmly filling out official government paperwork at the front desk. A large digital wall clock above my head clearly displayed 8:15 in the evening. The reality of my secure location shattered her entire carefully constructed legal timeline. She had just committed severe criminal perjury on a live national television broadcast. The judge stared down at Akiko with dark, disappointed eyes. He sharply asked her to explain the timeline discrepancy in her legally sworn testimony. Akiko opened her mouth to speak, but absolutely no words managed to escape her suddenly dry throat. She looked at her own expensive lawyer, desperately silently begging for a quick procedural rescue. Her lead attorney stared at the floor, paralyzed by the sudden destruction of his case. He knew his entire aggressive legal strategy was now worthless. A loud wave of chaotic whispering erupted across the packed gallery benches behind me. Reporters who had previously demanded my immediate imprisonment were now furiously typing new headlines. The judge slammed his gavel down 3 times to stop the growing public noise. He angrily ordered the live broadcast feed to be temporarily suspended due to the discrepancy. But the damage was already done to her profitable public reputation. The live feed had transmitted her total public humiliation into over 10 million civilian homes. Across the city, Yukio was sitting comfortably on his expensive imported leather sofa. He was watching the live trial broadcast on his custom flat-screen television. He held a heavy crystal glass filled with premium imported liquor in his right hand, He was ready to celebrate my final public destruction and secure his stolen financial future. He watched Mr. Sato pull the stamped document out of the brown folder. He saw the red digital numbers on the police station video footage clearly displayed on his screen. Yukio dropped his expensive crystal glass onto the polished hardwood floor. The fragile glass shattered into dozens of sharp pieces, spilling alcohol everywhere. The reality of his severe legal exposure crashed down onto his arrogant shoulders. He suddenly realized I had possessed a flawless ironclad defense since the very first night of my arrest. He understood exactly why I had remained so silent during the media storm. I was waiting for her to lock herself into an illegal perjury trap. The digital donation funds he was spending were now tied to an exposed fraud scheme. The financial crimes investigators would eventually trace every stolen dollar to his accounts. He quickly grabbed his expensive mobile phone and opened his secure internet browser application. He typed a desperate search query regarding the legal penalty for accessory to criminal perjury. His perfectly manicured hands shook as the cold search results loaded on the screen. The text clearly displayed a maximum penalty of 10 years inside a prison facility. He tried to dial her encrypted private number, forgetting she was trapped on the witness stand. The call went straight to a generic automated network voicemail system. His luxurious penthouse apartment suddenly felt like a decorated concrete holding cell. The wealth he had stolen was turning into legal poison. Back inside the central courthouse, the opposing attorney desperately requested a short private recess. He abandoned his arrogant posture, sweating under the bright ceiling lights. He realized his entire office was about to become a national laughingstock for pushing a fraudulent case against an innocent man. He urgently needed to rethink his ruined strategy away from the cameras. The disappointed judge granted a strict 15-minute pause to review the newly submitted evidence. He warned Akiko's side that this case was falling apart at the seams. The heavy wooden doors opened and the crowd rushed out into the central hallway. I remained seated at the defense table, watching Akiko slowly step down from the raised box. Her legs trembled so that a nearby court bailiff had to support her elbow. She looked nothing like the brave, confident survivor from the television broadcast. She locked eyes with me from across the empty center aisle of the quiet district courtroom. I did not offer her any trace of sympathy, anger, or cheap, dramatic, villainous mockery. I just looked at her as a defeated opponent who had eagerly dug her own shallow grave. She swallowed hard and quickly looked away, unable to handle the cold truth of my silence. Mr. Sato sat back down in his heavy leather chair and began organizing his physical documents. He did not smile or celebrate the tactical victory we had just easily secured on live television. He leaned closely toward me and whispered that the opposing lawyers were panicking in the hallway. They were desperately trying to figure out how to save their profitable civil lawsuit. They still believed the forged physical bruise gave them enough leverage to demand a settlement. They thought the broken timeline was just a technical error they could easily explain away. They did not know the same legal motion they had blindly signed 2 days ago contained a hidden blade. The buried financial audit clause was already fully active behind the closed digital doors. Forensic accountants were tearing through her private encrypted banking history. They were matching her public donations to the luxury purchases made by her hidden lover. While she was crying on the stand, the state was quietly freezing her illegal financial safety net. She was broke and under severe financial investigation without even realizing it yet. My mobile phone vibrated silently inside my dark suit jacket pocket with an urgent news alert. The major national broadcasting networks had just interrupted their regular scheduled programs. Glowing red text crawled across the bottom of every major digital television channel. The headlines declared an unexpected legal twist in Kenji's monster husband trial. The specific news anchor who had openly wept with her yesterday was now speaking in a serious tone. He loudly informed the viewing audience that the flawless timeline had shattered. Influential social media accounts were deleting their angry digital posts attacking my character. The public mob was suddenly extremely confused and eagerly looking for a brand new target. Her army of loyal online supporters began demanding a logical explanation for the police report. They wanted to know exactly why their brave hero had lied about the specific hour of the attack. The flawless, profitable victim narrative she had carefully built for 3 weeks was bleeding out. Her book publisher was already issuing an emergency statement delaying the national release. The 15-minute recess ended, and the loud crowd flooded quickly back into the secure room. The heavy tension in the air was suffocating. replacing their previous blind confidence. The judge returned to his elevated seat with a deeply frustrated expression carved into his face. He demanded that Akiko's side explain how they intended to proceed with this broken case. The lead opposing attorney wiped his sweating forehead with a cheap napkin and weakly requested to recall the witness. He wanted to give Akiko a desperate chance to correct her timeline mistake. Sato leaned back in his chair and gestured politely for them to continue digging their own hole. He knew the best thing we could do now was let her panic and invent a brand new lie on the spot. Akiko walked back toward the wooden stand with her entire body shaking in unfiltered terror. The first pillar of my legal revenge had just fallen, and she was trapped underneath. She thought she could easily survive this minor timeline error by attacking my character even harder. She had no idea the final video evidence was still quietly waiting in the dark. Akiko rushed out of the heavy double doors of the central court building. She did not hide her face or run toward her waiting vehicle. She marched toward the crowd of aggressive waiting journalists. She shoved her own defense attorney aside to reach the central microphone stand. Her previous fragile victim persona was gone. Pure aggressive fury replaced her carefully practiced television tears. She glared into the bright camera lenses with wild, unblinking eyes. She loudly declared that the submitted police report was a complete fabrication. She accused me of bribing a police desk sergeant to alter the official state database. She claimed I had orchestrated a criminal conspiracy. She doubled down on her shattered timeline with irrational confidence. She told the reporters the video timestamp was a cheap digital manipulation. She demanded the immediate arrest of the active duty officers who had processed my paperwork. The reporters furiously typed her wild accusations. Her expensive lawyer stood frozen behind her. All the blood drained from his face as he processed her legal mistake. He knew she was committing public defamation against a secure government agency. He reached out to grab her elbow, desperately trying to stop her. She slapped his professional hand away and continued shouting her wild paranoid delusions. She refused to let anyone silence her ego. She claimed the judicial system was corrupted by my hidden corporate wealth. She told the crowd that the judge was blinded by fake official papers. She pointed her trembling finger at the stone columns of the courthouse. She screamed that the entire judicial structure was working against her. The crowd of aggressive journalists pushed closer to the central microphone stand. They shoved heavy recording equipment into her personal space, eager to capture her fury. Her defense attorney desperately tried to shield her from the aggressive media push. He understood that every additional second on camera destroyed their civil lawsuit. I stood perfectly still near the interior glass courthouse windows. I watched her chaotic public meltdown without showing any trace of outward emotion. I did not interrupt her furious outdoor speech or attempt to defend my valid evidence. I let her freely destroy her own profitable credibility. Each reckless accusation she screamed created a new legal threat against her name. She was setting her own future prison sentence on fire. The journalists started shouting critical questions about her total lack of physical proof. They demanded to know how I could possibly hack a secure police database. She ignored their logical questions and insulted their professional integrity instead. She called the entire media establishment complicit in my criminal cover-up. Her voice cracked loudly under the immense pressure of her own rapid public escalation. The heavy stage makeup smeared across her cheeks, making her look unhinged. She was trapped by the reality of my geographical location. Her pride prevented her from ever admitting a single mistake to her loyal digital audience. Miles away, Yukio sat paralyzed in his expensive leather computer chair. His luxury penthouse apartment was silent except for his rapid, shallow breathing. He stared at the glowing monitor displaying the live broadcast of her disastrous press conference. He watched her accuse the Central Police Department. He typed furiously on his mechanical keyboard, pulling up a legal database. He searched for the penalties connected to false accusations against police officers, perjury, obstruction, and financial fraud. The search engine returned a block of terrifying legal text. The screen made one thing clear. This was no longer a media scandal. It was becoming a serious criminal case. His hands shook violently as he read the exact definition of a legal criminal accomplice. He realized the state would naturally tie his accounts to her crime. He frantically opened a new browser tab to check his offshore financial routing numbers. The secure portal demanded a secondary verification code he could barely type. The system loaded slowly, displaying a bright red warning banner across the top of his financial dashboard. The text warned him about a pending external verification hold. The solid gold luxury watch strapped to his left wrist suddenly felt heavy. It no longer felt like a powerful financial shield against his personal insecurities. It felt exactly like a visible, permanent tracking device chaining him to her sinking ship. He ripped the expensive metal off his arm and threw it across the desk. He realized Akiko was out of her mind and dragging him down into prison. She was choosing her public ego over their mutual financial survival. She had abandoned their original careful plan to steal the money quietly. Her refusal to accept a minor procedural defeat was destroying everything. He grabbed his encrypted mobile phone to demand she stop talking to the press. He stopped himself right before pressing the green call button on the glowing screen. He knew calling her right now would only leave another digital record for the authorities. The local investigators were likely already pulling her entire mobile communication history. He stood up from his chair and paced aggressively across the expensive hardwood floor. His luxurious penthouse suddenly felt like a decorated concrete holding cell. He walked over to his living room window and stared down at the busy city streets. He suddenly felt like every person walking below was an investigator tracking him. He desperately opened his private, encrypted email account to search for a fast legal exit. He wanted to contact a criminal defense attorney without alerting Akiko to his sudden betrayal. He realized that hiring his own lawyer would require financial retainers. He could not safely touch the stolen funds sitting in his frozen offshore accounts. He was trapped inside his own luxurious lifestyle by his own greed. He had foolishly trusted a deeply unstable narcissist to execute a complex financial fraud. Every dollar he touched was becoming evidence. He needed to find a quick exit strategy before the entire judicial system collapsed on his head. Mr. Sato walked over to the interior windows and stood beside me. He crossed his arms and watched the chaotic press conference finally finishing outside the building. He let out a short, sharp bark of genuine professional amusement. He had expected her to deny the truth, but this exact reaction was a beautiful legal gift. He turned to me and stated that her legal team was now destroyed. No credible lawyer could safely keep defending a client who openly accused active police officers of bribery without proof. He explained that we did not even need to prove the official document was authentic anymore. The powerful police union would absolutely crush her to protect their own institutional reputation. The department's lawyers would likely prepare their own defamation claim by tomorrow morning. They would aggressively demand complete access to her private communications to prove her malice. Her desperate attempt to survive a single perjury charge had multiplied her legal enemies. She was now fighting a multi-front legal war without a single valid piece of physical evidence. She had intentionally provoked the most powerful investigative body in the entire city. The local prosecutors would now naturally throw their full weight behind my defense. I pulled out my encrypted phone and checked the shifting social media trending topics. The public audience was divided, but her blind support was fracturing. People demanded to see the physical proof of her police bribery claim. They realized her wild conspiracy theory made absolutely no logical sense in the real adult world. One popular comment noted that bribing a police desk sergeant to forge a timestamp was practically impossible. The state database updated securely in real time. She had just replaced a sympathetic emotional tragedy with a deeply paranoid delusion. I locked my screen and placed the secure device back inside my dark suit jacket. I told Sato that she was reacting exactly the way we had mathematically calculated. We had cornered an arrogant predator, and she was blindly biting at the walls. Sato nodded slowly, thoroughly enjoying the complete destruction of her profitable public narrative. He knew her arrogant lawyers were experiencing professional terror outside. When an
arrogant narcissist is trapped by undeniable physical facts, their ego strictly prevents them from retreating. Admitting defeat causes a psychological collapse, so they irrationally attack the actual source of the truth. They invent massive conspiracies to justify their failure, destroying their own credibility.
Sato walked back to his heavy leather briefcase and pulled out a small black laptop. He set it down on a nearby wooden bench and rapidly booted the encrypted operating system. He opened the specific court portal linked to our active civil discovery phase. The digital interface showed the preliminary motions were fully approved by the presiding judge. Sato reminded me about the hidden audit clause we buried deep inside the initial paperwork. Her arrogant lawyers had legally authorized a full review of her digital banking history. He typed my official digital signature onto the formal execution command prompt. He pressed the enter key, sending the command to the Central Financial Authority. The digital progress bar instantly filled with solid green blocks across the glowing screen. The forensic accounting process was now active in the financial oversight system. State investigators were already pulling her private transaction logs from the National Financial Database. They would trace the massive influx of public donation money. They would clearly see the massive outgoing digital transfers executed from her primary accounts. They would track every dollar directed to Yukio's hidden corporate shell companies. We were going to expose the massive hidden financial rift between the two arrogant thieves. Akiko had been secretly hiding the true massive total of the stolen donations from her lover. She had proudly told Yukio they raised $20,000 in total digital support. I already possessed digital screenshots proving the actual public total was well over $80,000. She was actively stealing $60,000 from her own criminal partner. When Yukio finally realized her financial betrayal, their secret alliance would instantly shatter. I knew Yukio was arrogant, but he was not stupid regarding corporate money. Once he saw the official court-authorized forensic audit numbers, he would realize she was planning to abandon him. He would clearly understand that she intended to keep the vast majority of the payout for herself. He would turn against her to negotiate his own separate immunity. We were going to let their own mutual greed destroy their criminal partnership from the inside. There's absolutely no loyalty among thieves facing prison time. Sato closed his small black laptop with a quiet click and placed it securely inside his bag. He looked at me with cold calculation, ready for the next aggressive procedural strike. He told me the court would formally demand her verified bank statements by tomorrow morning. She would have nowhere to hide the massive stolen fortune she had illegally collected. The loud press conference outside was finally breaking apart under the heavy presence of courthouse security. Akiko was practically dragged away by her panicked defense team. She looked back toward the massive glass doors, desperately searching for a convenient target to blame. I met her wild, furious gaze with a blank, unreadable facial expression. Her profitable public narrative was shattered beyond any repair. Her financial safety net was collapsing silently in the hidden digital background of the financial oversight system. Her hidden corporate lover was actively pacing his expensive apartment in unfiltered panic. The final intellectual phase of my legal vengeance was quietly taking total control. I sat quietly in the comfortable leather chair inside Sato's private office. We watched the court portal update its status on his laptop screen. The financial audit we secretly triggered yesterday was now fully active. State accountants were aggressively pulling her raw digital banking data into their system. Across the city, Akiko sat inside her lead attorney's ruined conference room. Her lawyer slid the official court-authorized asset freeze notice across the heavy desk. He looked terrified by the severe government document. He told her she could no longer legally access a single dollar of the donation money. The lawyer placed a printed copy of the financial crime statute in front of her. The text clearly outlined the severe penalties for hiding stolen public assets. Akiko did not look genuinely panicked by the sudden financial restriction. She simply crossed her arms and offered an annoyed, dismissive sigh. She simply pushed the warning paper off the edge of the polished mahogany desk. The pages scattered across the floor, perfectly reflecting her disregard for reality. She arrogantly believed her secondary offshore accounts remained hidden. She thought she was much smarter than the trained financial crimes investigators. She genuinely believed her television fame elevated her far above standard legal consequences. She thought the strict rules only applied to normal, unimportant civilian people. Her lawyer loudly informed her that he was dropping her civil case. He refused to represent a client actively under a large-scale financial fraud investigation. She called him a useless coward and snatched her designer handbag from the chair. She stormed out of the legal building without looking back a single time. She made a selfish, tactical decision in the quiet elevator. She resolved to keep the court-authorized forensic audit a complete secret from her corporate lover. She knew Yukio would panic if he learned their primary funds were frozen. She needed him to stay calm and strictly compliant just a little bit longer. She still desperately needed his technical skills to manage the digital payment servers. She planned to use his blind loyalty until the very last possible second. Meanwhile, Yukio was pacing the floor of his luxury penthouse apartment. His own corporate accounts were flashing bright red verification warnings. The sudden banking holds meant his stolen money was temporarily inaccessible. He dialed her private encrypted number with shaking, terrified fingers. He desperately needed her to transfer emergency funds to cover his exposed tracks. He listened to the dial tone ring 3 times before she finally answered. She sat in the back of a luxury town car heading toward another television studio. Her voice was cold and dismissive of his severe anxiety. He begged her for a fast update on the frozen offshore routing numbers. He told her the financial crimes authorities were likely already circling his real legal name. Akiko laughed sharply at his terrified request for immediate financial help. She told him he was acting like a pathetic child over a standard security delay. She flatly lied and said the main donation funds were still secure. She ordered him to stop calling her while she managed the real media crisis. She disconnected the active call abruptly without offering a single word of comfort. She left him isolated with his rapidly mounting criminal exposure. Yukio stared at his dark mobile phone screen in terrified silence. His previous blind loyalty instantly evaporated under the severe threat of prison. He realized she was disconnected from the dangerous reality of their situation. Her massive ego was actively steering them into a solid concrete wall. He was a corporate financial thief by trade and specialized professional training. He knew exactly how to bypass basic digital banking security protocols to find answers. He sat down at his high-end computer terminal and cracked his tense knuckles. He ran a specialized brute force script against her primary donation landing page. He did not need to hack a secure government database today. He only needed to access the unencrypted public transaction logs she personally managed. The automated script bypassed her weak administrative password in 3 minutes. The raw incoming payment ledger successfully loaded onto his glowing digital monitor. He stared at the raw data strings populating his screen in real time. The digital numbers represented thousands of individual blind donations from angry, manipulated citizens. He filtered the massive spreadsheet to isolate the specific transactions routed to her control. He needed to verify the exact profit margin before executing his escape strategy. I watched the same ledger updating live on Sato's secure legal laptop. I knew exactly what Yukio was actively discovering at this moment. Akiko had proudly told him they raised exactly $20,000 in total support. She promised him half of that specific amount for his vital technical help. The digital ledger currently displayed on Yukio's screen showed a different reality. The true donation total was actually well over $85,000. Yukio scrolled rapidly through the massive list of processed civilian payments. He saw the huge daily cash deposits she had intentionally hidden from his view. He checked the outgoing transfer logs and saw her moving money into secret personal accounts. She was never planning to share the massive new wealth with him. He opened a secondary digital window to check the exact routing numbers on the hidden accounts. The destination banks were entirely registered under her sole personal identity. She had carefully structured the entire fraudulent enterprise to ensure she held control. If the authorities raided the accounts, he would be left with nothing. His paralyzing fear instantly transformed into violent, unfiltered human rage. He realized his supposed romantic partner was actively stealing from him right now. She was planning to let him take the heavy perjury fall alone. She fully intended to keep the public fortune strictly for her own benefit. He had risked his entire comfortable corporate career to help her build this fake tragedy. She rewarded his loyalty by treating him like a disposable tool. Yukio slammed his heavy fist onto his expensive wooden computer desk. The criminal alliance they built on lies was dead. There's absolutely no honor among thieves facing mandatory minimum prison sentences. He needed a fast immunity deal before she blamed everything directly on him. He knew she would throw him directly under the bus to save her own public reputation. The only way to survive was to strike her back before she saw it coming. He pulled open his encrypted email client and drafted a quick message to the prosecutor. He stared at the blinking cursor, paralyzed by a sudden wave of hesitation. Emailing the authorities directly would leave a permanent, undeniable digital paper trail. He needed to betray her without instantly confessing to his own financial crimes. He closed the email window and picked up his expensive mobile phone instead. He navigated to the contact page of my publicized legal defense team. He dialed the direct office line to Mr. Sato using a heavily encrypted calling application. He needed to offer a deal without revealing his exact true identity. Sato and I sat quietly in the law office, reviewing the next phase of our courtroom strategy. The heavy desk phone suddenly rang, completely shattering the silent room. Sato looked down at the bright digital caller identification display on the console. The small screen clearly showed a restricted, completely blocked private phone number. We rarely received anonymous calls directly on his primary dedicated legal line. Sato looked at me, instantly recognizing the unique strategic value of the immediate moment. I nodded slowly, silently confirming my exact suspicion about the unknown caller. The extreme financial pressure had finally cracked the weakest link in their alliance. Sato pressed the green speaker button and accepted the incoming secure connection. We heard rapid, shallow, terrified breathing echoing loudly from the plastic desk speaker. Sato calmly introduced himself and politely waited for a direct verbal response. The desperate caller hesitated for 5 long, agonizing silent seconds. Yukio opened his mouth to speak, but the massive weight of the betrayal choked him. He was absolutely terrified of the permanent consequences of his next spoken words. The active line went completely dead with a very sharp, audible electronic click. Yukio had panicked and aborted his initial desperate attempt at total betrayal. Sato smiled sharply and noted the exact call duration directly on his yellow legal pad. He tapped his metal pen against the paper with professional satisfaction. I told him the desperate rat was looking for a safe exit from the sinking ship. The financial reality had destroyed their mutual criminal trust. Sato agreed, predicting the panicked lover would definitely attempt to call us back very soon. The looming threat of a prison cell was a strong motivation. The court-authorized forensic audit was a slow, crushing mechanism designed to squeeze the truth out of criminals. It systematically dismantled their false security by freezing every stolen asset. Yukio could not pay his massive credit bills without continuous access to those frozen funds. His luxury lifestyle was currently imploding in exact synchronization with her legal case. We did not need to chase him down or aggressively threaten him with legal exposure. We simply needed to wait for his own overwhelming greed and fear to break him completely. Meanwhile, Akiko arrived at the television studio feeling powerful and untouchable. She stepped out of her luxury car, blind to the collapsing trap. She still completely believed she could win back the public with one more emotional performance. She thought her fake tears could easily wash away the hard digital evidence. She walked into the bright lobby, surrounded by her remaining dedicated public relations team. She demanded the best makeup artist to prepare her for the active camera. She had carefully drafted a brand new script blaming the police for her shattered timeline. She was ready to double down on her perjury charge. She did not know her lead attorney had filed his withdrawal papers with the court. She was currently walking into a legal battle entirely without a legal shield. She did not know her secret lover had just discovered her financial betrayal. She was completely unaware that her own partner was plotting to destroy her. I pulled out my secure mobile phone and checked the official updated court schedule. The presiding judge had formally demanded her presence for a final evidentiary hearing tomorrow. We had successfully isolated her from her legal counsel and her primary technical accomplice. She was now standing alone on a visible, dangerous stage. I opened the encrypted folder containing the flawless, high-definition hidden camera footage. I stared at the frozen image of her arrogant smile one more satisfying time. She was eagerly preparing to deliver the greatest acting performance of her entire life. She wanted to win a public award for her fabricated suffering. I was more than happy to let her step up to the podium and claim her glorious prize. I was going to let her accept the applause right before I dropped the final blade. Sato closed his laptop and packed his heavy legal files into his dark leather briefcase. He looked at me with the cold focus of a hunter ready to harvest the trapped prey. He told me tomorrow was the official day we finally ended this public circus. We were going to present the undeniable video evidence directly to the presiding judge. I stood up from the comfortable chair and adjusted the cuffs of my clean dark suit. The painful weeks of public humiliation and silent endurance were finally over. I had allowed her to completely dominate the media narrative and destroy my early reputation. I had given her every piece of rope she demanded to take. She had woven that same rope into a flawless, inescapable legal snare. Now it was finally time to pull the lever and watch the entire structure rapidly fall. I walked out of the quiet legal office and stepped onto the busy downtown city street. The cold evening air felt refreshing against my calm face. The hunt was entering its final phase of execution. The monster she created was finally coming to collect the massive debt. The air inside the Central District courtroom felt heavy and suffocating as the final evidentiary hearing officially began. Every seat in the public gallery was occupied by a silent, staring stranger. I sat at the defense table, keeping my physical movements small and my facial expression entirely unreadable for the cameras. I did not look at the packed crowd behind me. Akiko walked toward the witness stand for the very last time, wearing a simple navy blue dress that projected total humility. She looked like a broken woman seeking ultimate justice. She climbed the 3 wooden steps with a slight, intentional stumble that forced a nearby court officer to reach out. She was still playing the role of the victim. She sat down and looked into the primary television broadcast lens with a practiced expression of pure, quiet exhaustion. She wanted the world to see her suffering. The judge adjusted his heavy black robes and leaned forward, instructing the plaintiff to deliver her final personal statement to the court. He looked tired of the media circus. Akiko took a deep, shaky breath that echoed clearly through the sensitive microphones positioned on the witness stand. She closed her eyes for 3 long seconds to build tension. She began speaking in a soft, cracking voice that was specifically engineered to pull at the heartstrings of the millions watching at home. She talked about her ruined sense of safety. She claimed that every night since the supposed attack was a terrifying struggle against her own dark memories of my violence. She wiped a single tear from her cheek. She told the court that she did not want my money or my public humiliation anymore. She claimed she only wanted to feel safe inside her own quiet suburban home. She looked directly at the jury and stated that she was officially forgiving me for the brutal injuries I had supposedly caused. It was a brilliant, calculated tactical move. By offering fake forgiveness, she was positioning herself as a morally superior saint while simultaneously confirming my status as a monster. The gallery whispered in loud, emotional support of her. She begged the judge to consider the long-term psychological trauma she had endured. She requested a permanent restraining order, full custody of our child, and a financial award to fund her recovery. Her temporary attorney sat back with a satisfied expression, believing her emotional performance had repaired the damage from the broken timeline. He had stepped in only to facilitate this final statement, and he did not know about the hidden trap waiting inside our defense folder. Akiko finished her speech and looked down at her lap, the perfect image of a weary survivor. She believed she had successfully manipulated the entire judicial system once again. Mr. Sato stood up slowly from our table, his movements deliberate and entirely devoid of any aggressive theatrical energy. He did not look at the cameras or the angry crowd. He walked toward the center of the courtroom and stopped exactly 10 feet away from the witness stand. He did not open a folder or consult a single written note. He looked at the judge and stated that the defense had one final piece of physical evidence to submit for the official record. The room went utterly silent. Opposing counsel immediately stood up to object, claiming the evidentiary phase was officially closed. He called our request a desperate attempt to delay the unavoidable final verdict of the court. Sato calmly reminded the judge that the discovery motion signed 2 weeks ago allowed for the submission of any newly discovered digital assets. He cited the specific legal paragraph number. The judge reviewed the original signed motion on his private screen and nodded slowly. He overruled opposing counsel's objection and instructed Sato to proceed with the final evidence. Sato pulled a small silver metallic screw out of his pocket and held it up for the entire room to see. It looked like a completely normal piece of hardware. He explained that this specific object was actually an advanced, wide-angle recording device. He noted that it had been installed for home security purposes several days earlier. Akiko's face did not change immediately, but I saw her fingers grip the wooden edge of the witness stand. She still believed the device was just a hollow physical threat. Sato handed the silver screw to the court technician and instructed him to connect the internal microdrive to the primary display system. The large television screens flickered on. A blurry image of our suburban kitchen appeared on the monitors, showing the exact layout of the room from a high, hidden angle. The date was clearly visible. The timestamp in the corner matched the exact evening of the supposed attack. The quality of the video was perfect high definition, capturing every detail of the quiet room. I watched Akiko on the screen as she stood alone in the center of the kitchen. She was holding the heavy iron frying pan in her right hand. The courtroom remained silent as the video showed her practicing her swing. She was testing the weight of the metal against her own palm with clinical focus. We watched her strike her own left shoulder with a sudden, brutal force. The sound of the impact echoed through the courtroom speakers like a loud, heavy gunshot. A collective gasp of unfiltered horror erupted from the public gallery. People who had spent weeks hating me were now staring at the screen in absolute disbelief. The video continued, showing Akiko as she deliberately threw chairs across the room and shattered our ceramic dinner plates. She was meticulously crafting the scene of a struggle. The camera captured her face as she looked directly toward the hidden lens, entirely unaware that her every movement was being recorded for the eventual financial crimes authorities. She was smiling a twisted, arrogant smile while she inspected the purple bruise forming on her skin. It was the face of a predator, not a terrified, broken victim. Sato signaled the technician to increase the audio volume as the video showed Akiko picking up her phone. Her voice was crystal clear through the high-quality courtroom speakers. We heard her dial a number and put it on speaker mode. A man's voice answered, and the audio forensic team had already identified him as Yukio, her corporate lover. Akiko laughed loudly on the recording, telling Yukio that the hard part was finally finished. She called the physical pain of the strike completely worth the final payout. She bragged about how easy it was to manipulate the police and the public. She joked about using my stolen life savings to book a luxury flight to the Maldives. Yukio's voice filled the room, praising her brilliant acting skills and calling her a genius. They laughed together about how I would spend years rotting inside a cell. The video ended with Akiko looking in the mirror to check her makeup before dialing the emergency line. The screen went black, leaving the courtroom in a heavy, frozen silence. I looked at Akiko, who was still sitting in the witness stand. Her face was no longer pale or confused. It was a raw, distorted mask of pure, murderous rage. She suddenly stood up and screamed that the video was a deepfake. She accused me of using artificial intelligence to create a fictional scenario to ruin her reputation. She pointed a shaking finger at the judge and demanded that the evidence be thrown out. Her voice was no longer soft or cracking with fake, practiced emotional pain. It was a harsh, screeching sound that filled the room with the reality of her true character. The mask of the saint had been permanently ripped away from her. The judge did not say a single word. He simply stared at her with a look of absolute, icy disgust that was more powerful than any verbal or physical reprimand. The lead opposing attorney sat frozen at his table, his head in his hands. He knew his career was effectively over for bringing such a fraudulent case to district court. Members of the jury were looking at Akiko with expressions of unfiltered loathing. Some of them looked physically ill from the realization that they had been manipulated. The reporters in the gallery were no longer typing angry articles about my character. They were frantically recording every second of Akiko's public and permanent psychological collapse. Sato turned toward the judge and officially requested that the plaintiff's civil claim be dismissed with prejudice. He also requested an immediate referral for perjury charges. The judge slammed his gavel down with a sound that signaled the absolute end of the media circus. He ordered Akiko to remain in the building for immediate questioning. The court bailiffs moved toward the witness stand, positioning themselves to prevent her from leaving. She looked like a trapped animal, glancing around the room for an exit. I stood up from my chair and buttoned my dark suit jacket. I did not feel a rush of sudden joy or a need to shout at my defeated enemy. I felt only a cold, quiet sense of completion. I had endured the public dirt and the national hatred for this moment of absolute and undeniable truth. Akiko looked at me as the bailiffs took her arms. I met her gaze for 1 second and saw the total realization of her defeat finally sinking into her mind. She had tried to use the entire world as a weapon against one man. She had forgotten that the world eventually turns on anyone who treats them like a tool. Yukio was likely watching this from his luxury penthouse, knowing that his name was now officially part of a criminal record. His escape was officially canceled. The audit we had started earlier was already gathering the proof of their shared financial crimes. The video was just the final blow to their public and social existence. I walked toward the back of the courtroom, the crowd parting for me in a way they never had before. The whispers were no longer about a monster or a killer. They were whispering about the man who had stayed silent while the whole world screamed. They were realizing that my silence was actually my most powerful and lethal weapon. Reporters tried to shove microphones in my face as I reached the heavy oak doors. I ignored every one of them, focused only on the fresh air outside. I stepped out onto the courthouse steps and saw the digital billboard across the street. It was still displaying the cover of her upcoming ghost-written survival memoir. The image of her fake tears now looked like a grotesque joke to everyone standing on the sidewalk. People were already pointing at the screen and laughing with pure derision. The publishing company would likely issue a cancellation notice within the hour. Every copy of that book was now a piece of evidence for the district attorney's office. I stood on the top step and took a deep breath of the cool city air. The heavy weight of the last 3 weeks was finally lifting off my tired shoulders. The hunt was not quite over yet, as the criminal trials were still to come, but the primary battle for the truth had been won with total finality. I walked down the steps toward the waiting taxi, not looking back at the building. I had finally finished the work of exposing the monster who lived in my house. The silence I had maintained was now replaced by the sound of the truth echoing across the country. I was no longer the villain in someone else's carefully crafted story. I was the man who had survived the silence, and I was finally going home to reclaim the life they had tried so hard to steal away from me. As the car pulled away, I saw the flashing blue lights of the police vehicles arriving at the courthouse. They were not there to arrest me this time. They were there to take the woman who had traded her soul for a chance at fame. I closed my eyes and let the quiet hum of the city take over. The trap had closed perfectly, and there was nothing left for her to do but face the absolute consequences of her own choices. My long wait was finally over. The courtroom exploded into absolute chaos the very second the digital video finally ended on the large presentation screens. Reporters physically shoved each other over the heavy wooden benches to get a clear camera shot of the paused video footage. Akiko stood up from the wooden witness chair and violently gripped the heavy brass railing positioned directly in front of her. She screamed loudly that the footage was a highly edited, completely illegal digital fake specifically designed to ruin her. She pointed her shaking finger directly at my quiet defense table and demanded my immediate arrest for tampering with evidence. Her voice was harsh and guttural, entirely stripped of its practiced fragility and fake emotional exhaustion. She claimed I had used my hidden corporate wealth to manufacture a realistic fictional crime scene to destroy her life. She desperately tried to convince the stunned jury that their own eyes were lying to them inside that very courtroom. The presiding judge did not offer her a single word of comfort or indulge her desperate attempt to turn the courtroom against the evidence. He struck his heavy wooden gavel against the sounding block 3 rapid, loud, and forceful times to demand silence. He angrily ordered the court bailiffs to secure the main exits and prevent a dangerous public crush. He instructed the screaming plaintiff to sit down immediately, but the massive noise in the packed gallery refused to fully stop. Akiko refused to listen to the direct judicial order, completely lost in her own blinding, irrational criminal panic. She tried to climb down the wooden steps to physically reach her former lead attorney sitting frozen at the plaintiff table. The expensive lawyer simply turned his back on her and walked very quickly toward the main rear exit doors to escape the room. The aggressive opposing attorney who had previously called me a monster was currently hiding his sweaty face entirely behind his hands. He knew his professional reputation was badly damaged by her public lie and his blind trust. Mr. Sato sat quietly next to me, calmly packing his legal documents into his dark leather briefcase without a single arrogant smile. The angry judge adjusted his desktop microphone and looked directly at the packed, whispering public gallery to deliver his mandate. He formally announced that Akiko's civil claim was dismissed with prejudice, barring her from filing the same claim again. He stated that the evidence cleared me of the fabricated accusations at the center of the case. The heavy, suffocating weight of the false monster label finally began to vanish from my public record and my personal life. He then turned his cold, furious stare directly toward my former wife, still standing completely paralyzed near the wooden witness box. He stated that the submitted digital evidence clearly proved perjury, evidence fabrication, and large-scale public financial fraud. He officially ordered her immediate detainment inside the courtroom for lying under a sworn court oath to a sitting judge. 2 heavily armed court marshals immediately stepped toward the elevated wooden platform to execute the strict judicial order. They grabbed Akiko firmly by both arms and pulled her hands aggressively behind her trembling back without any gentle hesitation. She gasped loudly as they forced her down, finally realizing her untouchable media status was gone forever. Cold steel handcuffs clicked loudly around her thin wrists, echoing clearly through the suddenly quiet district courtroom. I watched the court marshals lead her out of the side security door in complete public disgrace and absolute humiliation. She had built her entire profitable public empire just to walk straight into a dark, isolated, secure holding cell. Across the city, a heavy tactical steel ram violently smashed through the front door of a highly exclusive luxury penthouse apartment. armed financial crimes agents flooded quickly into Yukio's expensive living room, sweeping the entire massive floor with drawn service weapons. Yukio was sitting desperately at his high-end computer desk, frantically trying to completely delete his offshore banking routing numbers. He did not even try to run toward the expensive glass balcony or fight back against the overwhelming tactical team breaching his home. He simply dropped his shaking hands from the mechanical keyboard and stared blankly at his glowing monitor screen in absolute defeat. He knew the hidden financial audit had already completely copied his raw digital ledgers and illegal offshore transaction logs. An agent threw him roughly against the polished hardwood floor and secured his wrist tightly with heavy plastic tactical zip ties. 2 hours later, Yukio sat alone inside a freezing, windowless interrogation room, located deep inside the central police precinct. He was sweating heavily, right through his expensive custom-tailored shirt, completely terrified of his incoming prison sentence. He desperately wanted to secure a fast immunity deal before Akiko could testify against his character in a district court. He leaned across the scratched metal table and started talking extremely rapidly to the two silent financial crimes investigators. He told them that he was completely manipulated by a highly unstable, dangerous clinical narcissist who used his blind trust. He claimed he had no idea she was faking her physical injuries when they originally launched the public campaign. He swore he only helped her manage the digital payment servers out of blind, foolish, completely misguided romantic love and deep pity. He practically begged the silent officers to believe his fake innocence and grant him immediate leniency for his cooperation. He promised to hand over all the stolen donation money immediately if they let him walk away without a permanent criminal record. He was eager to throw his former lover directly under the legal bus to temporarily save his own miserable skin. The lead detective did not interrupt his desperate, emotional criminal confession for several long, silent minutes. He simply opened a thin black folder and pulled out a small, advanced digital audio recording device from the evidence bag. He placed the heavy metal device directly in the center of the scratched table, right in front of the panicked suspect's face. He pressed the green play button with a single finger and leaned back slowly in his squeaky office chair to watch the absolute realization. The crystal clear audio of the kitchen phone call instantly filled the small concrete room with undeniable proof of his heavy involvement. Yukio heard his own arrogant voice laughing loudly on the speaker about stealing my entire life savings and destroying my entire future. He heard himself actively praising her brilliant acting skills and mocking my upcoming, highly anticipated permanent prison sentence. The digital recording proved his total, undeniable criminal complicity in the massive, coordinated financial fraud scheme. Yukio stopped talking instantly, his jaw dropping completely open in absolute, unfiltered shock at the devastating audio playback. The color drained from his face as the digital recording finally clicked off, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence. The detective leaned forward and asked if he still wanted to officially claim he was a helpless romantic victim of a terrible manipulation. Yukio stared down at his handcuffed wrists, broken, silent, and devoid of any further desperate lies. By the next morning, the national media narrative had reversed its aggressive direction against my public character. The same news anchors who had openly cried for her on live television were now visibly furious on their morning broadcast panels. They loudly condemned her as a brilliant, dangerous sociopath who had manipulated the entire country for cash. They demanded the maximum possible prison sentence for her terrible, calculated abuse of public trust. The massive publishing company immediately released a public statement canceling her upcoming ghostwritten survival memoir. They confirmed they were suing her for massive breach of contract and demanding the immediate return of their financial advance. Millions of angry internet users frantically deleted their old, hateful digital posts about my character across all major social platforms. They replaced their cruel, aggressive insults with long, highly defensive digital apologies in my flooded comment sections. They claimed they were only trying to protect a fragile victim and practically begged me not to sue them for severe public defamation.
A surgical strike requires absolute patience. When dealing with a narcissist who uses the public as a weapon, you cannot fight them in the mud. You must let them climb high enough that their eventual fall becomes entirely fatal. Short-term humiliation is the necessary cost of building an inescapable structural trap. The protagonist simply allowed the prey to build their own cage.
I completely ignored every interview request from the major networks and permanently turned off my annoying social media notifications. I had absolutely zero interest in accepting their reactive public sympathy now that the truth was fully visible. Mr. Sato filed the expedited family court paperwork right before the strict noon deadline at the Central District Legal Administrative Office. The family judge reviewed the collapsed accusations and the new evidence, then granted me emergency full custody while the permanent order was prepared. The authorities formally unfroze my life savings and returned the funds directly to my primary secure banking accounts without any delay. The remaining public donation money was officially seized as criminal evidence to be slowly redistributed to the original donors. My professional reputation was restored, and my corporate employers immediately issued a massive, public formal apology letter. I walked slowly through the quiet paths of the Central City Park later that weekend, thoroughly enjoying the unbroken, peaceful silence. The afternoon sun felt warm and deeply welcoming against my tired face for the very first time in 3 brutal weeks. My young child held my right hand tightly, happily watching a group of ducks swimming calmly near the large, peaceful Central Park pond. The heavy, suffocating anxiety of the false criminal accusations was permanently gone from my daily routine and my cleared mind. I did not have to hide my face behind dark sunglasses or constantly avoid the busy public crowds in the downtown district anymore. Akiko was currently sitting inside a heavily guarded secure holding facility, waiting for her final, publicized criminal sentencing hearing. Yukio was locked completely away in a separate high-security cell block, facing his own financial fraud charges and complete public ruin. They genuinely thought I was just a weak, convenient tool they could easily discard for pure public profit and digital public sympathy. They completely underestimated the cold, calculated patience of a silent, highly observant man holding absolute digital proof of their criminal lies. I squeezed my child's hand gently and smiled completely at the peaceful ripples forming quickly on the clear, incredibly reflective pond water. The long, exhausting hunt was officially finished, and I had finally reclaimed my quiet, normal life from the broken monsters